But out of the current candidates, I would say that, and this isn't a personal endorsement or anything, but just looking at the current state of play, Kemi Badenoch's probably the one to beat. Robert Jenrick seems to be consolidating support on the right, and it's an open field as to who runs from the other slot.
Yes, it's the comedy series of The Apprentice that everyone's gripped by. Who will win the big job as the next Tory leader? Henry Hill, acting editor of Conservative Home, joins me. Hi, Henry.
Hello.
So let's go. First of all, when do we think the leader, before we get into the runners and riders, how long is this series going to be? When will we know how long the contest will take place?
That is currently slightly up in the air. The one thing that seems increasingly certain is it's not going to be a short contest. Rishi Sunak hasn't done the thing where he resigns immediately and plunges the party into it. There's a growing consensus that the one resource the party currently has plenty of is time, and that there should be time taken to try and ensure a more deliberative contest rather than simply a sort of orgy of finger pointing. The question is, how long? Do they want to have a leader in place by party conference? Do they want to have a leader in place? This looks increasingly unlikely by the time Parliament comes back from the summer recess. Or do they kick it even longer than that and use party conference as a hustings? The other complicating factor is that Rishi Sunak has indicated that he does not want to stay on that long. And therefore, if they don't go for a shorter contest and he doesn't stay on, they'll need an interim leader, a caretaker leader. And who will that be?
Well, yeah, not least because he needs to fill his shadowed cabinet at some point because so many of them lost their seats. So let's whip through them then. Suella Braverman basically used her victory speech at her count to sort of launch her attack on the party. Is she was that a mistake, do you think? Because there's lots of reports, including on Con Home, that her leadership campaign's already faltering.
Yeah, I think Suella Braverman's leadership, obviously it's too early to pronounce it completely dead in the water, but there are a couple of problems with it. One is she has always been the candidate who took the hardest line on there needs to be some kind of pact with reform, make up with Nigel Farage. And over the past month, the way Reform handled that election campaign, the disgraceful way that they sort of resisted getting rid of openly racist candidates and so on, has really toxified Reform. Not necessarily, we haven't surveyed them yet with the grassroots, although I can't imagine it's helped, but definitely with the other leadership contenders. And also there's just the question of loyalty, right? The people who are in the Conservative Party, the membership who are going to make the final decision, these are the people who have not defected to Reform. These are the people who have not torn up their membership cards over the last 5 years. So to have somebody launching an attack on the party in those terms before polling day, when activists are still out trying to elect Conservative MPs, and to then have that candidate refuse to rule out a defection to Reform, that really doesn't help her campaign with party members.
OK, then, so we've got Robert Jenrick and Victoria Atkins just happened to pop up on Laura Kuenssberg's show yesterday and then said, oh, no, I'm not here to talk about the leadership. Tom Tugendhat is having birthday drinks in Westminster tonight, just happens to have invited half the lobby. James Cleverly's made clear privately that he might not run, but then maybe he could have his arm twisted. Priti Patel, Kemi Badenoch, who are you particularly keeping an eye on, Henry?
So the question is, normally in a Tory leadership contest, you end up with a candidate of the right and a candidate of the rest of the party. And where exactly that line is drawn varies election to election. Now, Penny Mordaunt was one of the front runners for want of a better term, left of the party slot, and she obviously lost her seat. So there you've basically got Atkins, Cleverly and Tugendhat potentially fighting it out, whereas all of the other candidates are on the right. And that poses an interesting challenge for right-wing MPs in a sense, because it's nice that they have more options, but there will be a tendency perhaps for those candidates to start ripping lumps out of each other to try and claw their way to the top of the pack, which won't help any of them, and a risk that if it gets down in the MP rounds to the final three, that if the right-wing MPs don't coordinate their votes, they could end up, thanks to a split vote, sending a weaker candidate into the final two. But out of the current candidates, I would say that, and this isn't a personal endorsement or anything, but just looking at the current state of play, Kemi Badenoch's probably the one to beat. Robert Jenrick seems to be consolidating support on the right, and it's an open field as to who runs from the other slot.
Henry, always good to speak to you. Thanks for that. Henry Hill from Conservative Home.
Let's speak to Sir Mark Spencer, former Conservative MP, Chief Whip, Farming Minister. He lost his Sherwood Forest seat to Labour last week. Good morning to you.
Good morning.
Is there any one of those three that that speaks for you? Because they're all saying quite different things. Kevin Hollinrake, Giles Watling and Marcus Fish.
Yeah, I think, to be honest, when you on the back of a defeat like we've suffered, it's time to stop speaking and to start listening. and I think that's the first thing that the Conservative Party needs to do, is to listen to the electorate, listen to their concerns, their aspirations, their desires. And we've got time, actually. You know, we've got 5 years. This Labour government is going to last the full parliamentary term. I think the first thing we need to do for the first 18 months, 2 years, is find a new leader and let that new leader go around the country and listen to people. And that's the first thing we need to do.
OK, I'm going to come back to the new leader in a second. The thing is, when you were canvassing, you must have been listening to people. What were they telling you?
Yeah.
Or were you not listening to them?
No, we were listening, of course, and I think, but you're also transmitting, aren't you? And I think you're trying to get your point across. But I think, by the time we got to the election period, the battle actually was trying to convince those who were minded to vote Reform to not vote Reform, because that will allow the Labour Party to win. Now, that came to pass, but I think the challenges and the problems were rooted way before that moment. And, I think that's what we need to listen to. That's what we need to go back and root and branch, look at what the Conservative Party aspirations are, what our core values are, and how they match up to our constituents and people, our communities.
So what I'm hearing there, and I understand that you want to listen, and that's I'm sure our listeners will be heartened by that, and people who voted in the general election. But what I am hearing is this idea of identity, of what the Conservative Party is. Where is it going? Is it going to the left? Is it going to the right? Or does it need to regain the centre?
Yeah.
What do you think?
I honestly think that is a red herring. So no constituent of mine has ever said to me, I'm left wing, I'm right wing. But what they do know is what their values are, what their aspirations are, what their desires for the future are, what they want to see for their family. And I think we as the sort of political class, as politicians, obsess over these ideologies and these sort of core values. But actually, what we should be thinking about is, what are the values and the aspirations of our constituents and our community?
Okay, so on that then, so immigration, for example, that was something that the kind of latter stages of the Conservative government really, really obsessed about. And no one's saying that immigration is not important, because it is.
That's right.
And people always say it's important. And yet the policy itself, the amount of money, the amount of time that was spent talking about it was probably too much.
Yeah. So what I hear on the doorstep is people say to me, immigration must be lower. And I say to them, right, so do you want to stop the cancer specialists coming from America? And they say, no, of course not. Of course we don't want to stop that sort of person coming here. And I say, well, do you want to stop the guys coming to pick cauliflowers in Lincolnshire? Because we need to obviously produce food. And they'd say, oh, no. We of course, we don't mind those people who are coming to do a job. So when you get into the debate, it's much more nuanced than we as politicians try to simplify it down to pro or anti-immigration. Actually, the electorate are a bit more sophisticated than that and do understand some of these challenges. And we've got to spend a bit of time and listen and understand that before we start to come out with new policies and new ideas.
Now, in terms of a leader, I think Kevin Hollinrake was saying, we can probably wait until Christmas to get a new leader. That's a long time. I mean, it's unlikely, I think, isn't it, that Rishi Sunak will want to cling on until then. When would you like a new leader in place by?
So I think we need to get on with it. But I think it's more important what the new leader does rather than who they are. And that new leader, again, as I was saying, needs to take the time to listen, to understand what we got wrong, what the electorate's view of us is, and how we can start to return to, some sort of credibility, if you like, with the electorate, and make sure that our values align with their values and our policies align with their aspirations.
So does that mean that maybe you'd quite like the idea of someone kind of calm, someone interim, perhaps someone who's not box office?
Well, I mean, I think we obsess over personalities, don't we? I think, of course, you want someone who is calm. The Conservative Party is blessed with a number of those people that have the talents, the ability to guide us through these troubled waters. But I'm sure there's a big team behind whoever becomes leader. There's a big team there ready to help and assist, as long as that team and the party understands that we've got to go through a process of understanding what we got wrong, recognising that we got wrong, admitting it, and holding our hands up to that, and then listening to the electorate as to what their aspirations will be in 5 years' time. Remember, we're not going to get a chance to go back to the electorate with any real credibility for 5 years. So why not spend 2 years listening, then develop your policy ideas for 5 years' time? That's what the party needs to do to go through that process. And the world may well be a very different place in 5 years.
Just finally, do you think the result would have been any different if this election had been held in November?
Well, we'll never know, will we? And it's great fun.
What's your feeling?
Speculate. I can make an argument both ways. Actually, that it could have been worse because the die was cast, but you never know what's going to come up in politics to give you either a leg up or a kick where it hurts, frankly. And either of those things could have happened.
Okay, well, thank you very much for talking to us. That's Mark Spencer, former Conservative MP, Chief Whip, Farming Minister. He lost his Sherwood Forest seat to Labour last week.